If you're pouring your heart into your podcast, but still struggling to turn those listeners into paying clients, I've got something just for you. Imagine having a clear, simple plan to turn your listeners into buyers without relying on a huge audience or spending hours on social media. That's exactly what we'll create together in a podcast profit plan discovery call. During this free 20-minute call, I'll help you discover more opportunities for profit in your podcast and give you the next best step to turn your show into a client attracting machine. If I've got an offer that will help you expedite this process, then we can also discuss working together. Book your free podcast profit plan discovery call now by going to podcastingformoms.co/profit plan or by clicking the link in the show notes. I can't wait to chat with you. If you ever thought maybe I need a new podcast name, maybe my branding is the problem, and maybe I should just start over, then this episode is going to save you a lot of time, energy, and honestly, unnecessary stress. Because I'm going to be saying something that might feel a little spicy, and that is your podcast probably doesn't need a rebrand, it needs a strategy. Let's get into it. Welcome to Podcasting for Moms, the show for moms in business ready to start, grow, and scale a podcast that turns their listeners into buyers. I'm Jenny Soneson, a podcast strategist and fellow mom entrepreneur. You're in the right place if you want to learn how to start and grow a podcast that attracts your ideal clients and really does the heavy lifting for you when it comes to selling your offers, all while balancing life as a busy mom. Are you ready to create a podcast that grows your income, impact, and influence? Let's make podcasting work for you because as moms, we know how to get things done. All right, let's jump into the episode. Hey, and welcome to Podcasting for Moms. I'm Jenny, and I help busy moms start, grow, and actually monetize their podcasts without burning out in the process. And today we're talking about something that I see all the time, and podcasters hitting plateau, feeling really frustrated with their growth, not seeing new leads or clients come in, and then immediately assuming something must be wrong with my podcast brand. So they start thinking about something must be wrong with my podcast. So they start thinking about new cover art, new music, new name, new everything. When in reality, they are about to fix the wrong problem. So let's talk about why this happened, because honestly, it makes sense. A rebrand feels productive, exciting, and ultimately like a fresh start. It gives you that new energy feeling. And if you've been feeling stuck or discouraged, of course your brain is like, let's just start over. That's going to fix it. But here's the problem. A rebrand is visible, whereas a strategy is invisible. And most podcast growth issues, they live in the invisible. So when a podcast isn't growing or converting, it's usually not because of your branding. It's usually because of gaps like unclear positioning. Maybe your podcast is too broad or too vague or trying to speak to everyone. You might also have a weak episode strategy, so your episodes aren't designed to pull in the right listeners or move them forward. Maybe you don't have a clear listener journey. People listen to your episodes and then what's next? They don't really know. They don't have like an intentional path from listener to lead to client. Maybe you're not including calls to action in your episodes, or maybe they're just ineffective. So maybe you're either not telling people what to do next, or the next step isn't actually aligned with what they need. The last thing could be inconsistent messaging. So your content isn't reinforcing what you do, who you help, or how you help them. And honestly, none of these things get fixed with a new logo. So if it's not a rebrand, then what does your podcast actually need? It needs a strategy that answers these three core questions. So the first question is, who is this podcast for really? Not everyone who might benefit, but who is that ideal client that you created this podcast for? The second thing you want to ask yourself is, what is this podcast designed to do? Is it designed to grow your audience, generate leads, sell a specific offer? Because those different things require different types of content. And lastly, what happens after someone listens? Like, what is that next step you want them to take? Where are you guiding them? And this is where everything shifts, because when your podcast has a strategy, your episodes become intentional, your content becomes focused, and your calls to action, they actually convert. Imagine that. So here are some signs that you need a strategy, not a rebrand. So the first thing is you're getting some downloads, but you're not getting any inquiries or sales. Your topics feel all over the place. You're creating content consistently, but it's not leading anyone anywhere. You feel like your podcast should be working, but it's not. And you keep thinking about starting over instead of optimizing what you have. That's not a branding problem. That is a strategy gap. So here is what to do instead. So instead of burning it all down, I want you to do this. The first thing I want you to do is to audit your current podcast. So take a look at your last 10 episodes and ask yourself these questions. Who is this actually for? What problem is each episode solving? And is there a clear next step? So do that. And then once you audit those 10 episodes, I want you to simplify your focus. So you do not need more topics. You just need tighter messaging around what you do, who you help, and how your podcast supports that. And the third step is to fix your listener journey. So every episode that you have should point somewhere, whether that is a free resource, a offer, a private podcast, whatever that is. I don't want you to just say thanks for listening and not actually point them somewhere. And I want to say this really clearly. Your podcast is not broken. You don't need to scrap it completely. You don't need to start from zero. You just need to refine it, because the fastest path to growth is almost always optimizing what already exists. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I know this is me, but I have no idea what to fix first, that is exactly what I help you do. So if you want my eyes on your podcast, you can book a podcast audit where I help you diagnose your podcast bottlenecks. Or if you kind of already know like what needs to be fixed, but you need help actually fixing it, then you might want to check out my podcast growth intensive. This is where we're going to be mapping out exactly what's missing and how to fix it, because your podcast shouldn't just sound good, it should work. So to check out either of those two options, click the link in the show notes. And yeah, if this episode gave you a little bit of clarity or called you out in the best way, I want you to send it to a fellow podcaster who is thinking about rebranding their show right now. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning into Podcasting for Moms. I hope today's episode gave you the tools and inspiration you need to make your podcast work smarter, not harder. If you love what you heard, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It means the world and helps other moms in business find the show. For more tips, resources, and support, head to podcastingformoms.co. Remember, you're not just building a podcast, you're building your legacy. Until next time, friends.